Let me tell you about one of my best-selling landscape photographs. This is Roots of Rattlesnake Point. Now, let me give you the backstory. In 2004, 2005, I was making my living as a sports photographer, and there was the NHL lockout. Do you remember that? The NHL lockout. So they canceled basically the whole season. What was I going to do? So I decided I'm going to shoot some black and white landscapes on 8x10. I'd always shot 4x5. I'd shot a bit of 8x10 in college, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to do my Ansel Adams era, and I'm going to shoot black and white 8x10. And I had grown up in Burlington, and I used to go to Rattlesnake Point. I basically spent my youth and my late youth rock climbing at Rattlesnake Point. It was my favorite sport. Well, ice climbing was really my favorite sport, but in the summer we liked to rock climb, and Rattlesnake Point was the place. So I knew there was these old ancient cedars, and they had interesting roots. So early in the season, I borrowed an 8x10 camera from a friend. After that, I bought my own, but I borrowed one, and I went and I photographed these roots. Now, this is an interesting photo because it sold well at art in the park type things. Although I was a sports photographer, 2004, 2005, that started to collapse as there was the hockey strike and there were other issues as well. And I was kind of morphing into other types of photography. I live a couple hours north of Burlington now, and we're trying to move and relocate. So I'm going back to some of those places where I spent a lot of my youth and re-photographing them. So I went back to Rattlesnake Point to the very same roots, and I re-photographed them. Instead of using 8x10, because I don't have an 8x10 anymore, I just shot them on the Hasselblad. Let me walk you through this shoot on this first roll. I did a few rolls. I'm going to break them down into different videos, but this is the first roll. And the lens that I used was the Hasselblad 50. So my Hasselblad is the 555. That's the one with the motor on the base. And the 50mm lens, it's a fantastic lens. It's the later version, the CFI version, if you're keeping score. And as I said, shot on Kentmere 200 and processed in Ilford ID11. So there's some of the technical things. So when I got to Rattlesnake Point, I searched around for this old route that I remember. I remember we used to tie the ropes and the webbing and that to these trees when we were rock climbing. Now it's all bolted, but back when I did it, we used to wrap a carpet around the tree and then, put our webbing on that so it didn't damage these ancient trees. All good to do. And anyways, I was happy to be able to find this interesting route. I'm sure it's the same one that I photographed so many years ago, like 2004. So I'm shooting this with the Hasselblad with the 50. I'm at half a second at f22 and a third, and I'm using Kentmere 200. I rate that at ISO 125, and I underprocess it. So I did try a couple of different angles, and as I mentioned, I shot a couple of different rolls, and I'll kind of get into those another day. But on this one, this here is my kind of like my go-to first shot. So on a tripod with the 50 on the Hasselblad 555. Now, the problem with the roots is they're close to the edge of the escarpment. If you fall over the edge, like, you're going to die. I learned that from rock climbing. So also the light is brighter closer to the edge because you've got the trees and the foliage are blocking the light inside where these roots are. But on the edge, it's more open light. So you definitely are going to have images that are brighter as you get closer to the edge. Let me show you a couple of prints from the first angle that I chose. So again, with the 50mm lens, Kentmere 200, and I'm printing it on Fomatol developer with Ilford resin-coated multi-grade warm tone paper. So these images are from the warm tone paper with the warm tone developer. I'll talk another day about the developer more. So this is the first exposure, basic exposure, and then, you've got that area on the edges where it's lighter, there's more open light, and so it's too bright. So I have, on the second frame, I've burned one full stop in the upper right-hand corner, almost a full stop in the upper left-hand corner, and a little bit on the bottom two corners just to kind of burn them in again. So I don't think I burned it in enough. So then the third print, I've dodged a little bit right in the very center where the roots are, where the darkest part is. And I've burned a full exposure on the upper left. I've burned a full exposure on the two bottom corners. And I've burned two exposures on the upper right, trying to burn in that highlight that's over the field. Again, it wasn't enough, so I made a fourth print, similar on the left, burned in a stop, similar on the bottom, burned in a stop, and now 3 stops on the upper right. Everything over the root on the upper right has some burning, and as I worked my way into the corner, I got up to as much as 3 stops. So that whole area doesn't have 3 stops, but it all has some burning. And right to the edge in the corner does have 3 stops. It's still not enough, but I think I've made the print that I wanted to make. Now this second shot is very similar. I actually moved the camera, did some other pictures, and then I came back to this. I wanted to just try it again. The light had changed slightly. The first shot is the basic exposure. This is a little bit thinner, this negative, and I actually stopped down a stop instead, because I would have been at like 6-second exposure in the enlarger, and I stopped down a stop so I could go 12 seconds, which just gives you more time to burn and get your act together. And then I burned in the corners on the right, on the left. I burned in a stop. The bottom I burned in about a stop, and then the upper right corner edge over the roots I burned in as much as 3 stops, just to bring that highlight area in. Could it use a bit more? Yeah, it probably could even use a little bit more. Now this third shot on this roll, I've moved the camera, and it looked interesting while I was standing there, and I did take a couple of frames, and then I wasn't going to print them. I printed this first one, and I thought I'll just see what it looks like. And I kind of liked it. It kind of had a nice look to it. So then it was just too light out into the sky area. So the second print, I've just darkened the top of the picture a bit just to make it a little more reflective of what I remembered. But these 3 shots are on the same roll of Kentmere 200, shot with the 50mm lens on the Hasselblad. And a lot of fun. It's nice to go back to these spots that you've gone to decades ago. So I was last there in 2004, so 20 years ago. The roots haven't really changed much. I have, though. I hope. I hope I've changed. A lot of fun.